Welcome to the Story Vault, where Miss Marple unlocks captivating mysteries.
In the shadowed halls of Thornfield Grange, a dusty recipe book hides a deadly secret. A poison penned a century ago, its truth worth killing for, when Dr. Lionel Redfern is found dead. Cyanide on his lips, Hercule Poirot steps into a web of lies. Who among the elegant guests, Lady Ashby, her reckless nephew, his troubled wife, the enigmatic secretary, or the serene vicar, guards a past so dark it demands murder? What cryptic times, 1215 to 3040, hold the key to betrayal? Join Poirot's little grey cells in unraveling a mystery where every clue matters, and the truth is as sharp as a knife. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Thornfield Grange. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Dorset, bathing the ivy-clad walls of Thornfield Grange in a warm, deceptive glow. To Captain Arthur Hastings, the manor appeared an archetype of English serenity, a sprawling estate nestled in the village of St. Aldwyn, where time seemed to dawdle, like a guest reluctant to depart. Yet, beneath the charm of its mullioned windows and manicured lawns, Hastings sensed an undercurrent of unease, as though the very stones of the house whispered secrets they dared not voice aloud. He stood on the gravel drive, adjusting his tie with a habitual fidget, and glanced at his companion, Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective, immaculate in his patent leather shoes and neatly pressed suit, surveyed the scene with the keen eye of a jeweller, appraising a flawed gem. His moustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly, a sign Hastings recognized as Poirot's silent acknowledgment of something amiss. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice precise as a metronome. "You observe, do you not, the curious stillness of this place? It is too perfect, too composed, like a stage before the curtain rises on a tragedy." Hastings frowned, unsure whether to attribute Poirot's remark to his penchant for the dramatic or to some genuine intuition. "It's just a country house, Poirot. Lady Ashby invited us for a weekend of rest, not a melodrama. She's an old friend of my cousin's, you know, widowed, wealthy, and keen on her charities. Hardly the setting for intrigue." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with amusement. "Rest, Hastings? No, no. When Lady Ashby writes to Hercule Poirot, it is not for the pleasure of my company alone. There is always a puzzle, a knot to untangle. And this invitation," he tapped the crisp envelope in his pocket, "it has the scent of urgency, though she cloaks it in politeness." The invitation had arrived 3 days prior, penned in Lady Ashby's elegant hand, requesting Poirot's presence at Thornfield Grange for a quiet weekend to celebrate the unveiling of a family heirloom. An ancient recipe book, said to date back to the Regency era, recently discovered in the manor's attic. Hastings had been delighted at the prospect of a break from London's bustle, but Poirot, ever suspicious of unsolicited hospitality, had accepted only after much deliberation. As they approached the oak-panelled door, it swung open to reveal Lady Eleanor Ashby herself, a woman of 60 with silver hair swept into a chignon, and a smile that seemed to strain against some inner weight. Her navy silk dress rustled as she extended a hand. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how kind of you to come. I trust the journey was pleasant." "Most agreeable, Lady Ashby," Poirot replied, bowing with continental flourish. "The English countryside, it restores the soul, does it not?" Hastings nodded politely, though he noted the faint tremor in Lady Ashby's hand as she gestured them inside. The entrance hall was a study in grandeur, polished mahogany, a crystal chandelier, and portraits of stern-faced Ashbys gazing from gilded frames. A grandfather clock ticked solemnly, marking the hour at precisely 4:47 p.m. on that Friday, August 22nd, 1925. "You must meet my guests," Lady Ashby said, leading them to the drawing-room. "We're a small party, but I hope you'll find the company stimulating." The drawing-room was a tableau of restrained elegance, its occupants arranged like figures in a carefully composed painting. Hastings took stock of them, his military habit of observation kicking in. Seated by the fireplace was Dr. Lionel Redfern, a bespectacled physician in his late 40s, his fingers drumming nervously on the arm of his chair. Beside him, Miss Clara Duval, a French émigré and Lady Ashby's secretary, sipped tea with an air of quiet vigilance, her dark eyes flitting over the room. On a velvet settee sat Mr. Gerald Ashby, Lady Ashby's nephew, a handsome man of 30, with a restless energy and a cigarette dangling from his lips. His wife, Mrs. Beatrice Ashby, a striking blonde in her late 20s, toyed with a pearl necklace, her smile brittle as porcelain. Finally, standing by the window, was Reverend Thomas Hale, a gaunt vicar with a serene demeanour that seemed at odds with the room's taut atmosphere. Introductions were made, and Poirot's gaze lingered on each guest, as though cataloguing their gestures for later scrutiny. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's methods, knew that Poirot was already constructing a mental dossier on each person present. "The recipe book," Lady Ashby began, her voice bright but strained, "is quite the treasure. It belonged to my great-grandmother Cassandra Ashby, and contains not only culinary secrets but also notes on the family's history. I thought it fitting to share it with those closest to me, before donating it to the village archive, a splendid gesture," Reverend Hale said, his voice soft as a prayer. "Such relics bind us to our past." Gerald Ashby snorted, flicking ash into a tray. "A dusty old book? Hardly worth a fuss, Aunt Eleanor. You should sell it to some collector and be done with it." "Gerald, please," Beatrice murmured, her tone sharp. "It's a family heirloom, not a trinket." Dr. Redfern cleared his throat. "I, for one, am intrigued. Old recipes often reveal medicinal practices of the time. Fascinating from a scientific perspective, Miss Duval set down her teacup with a delicate clink. "It is not only the recipes, Doctor. The book, it holds stories, secrets perhaps, of the Ashby family. Is that not so, Lady Ashby?" Lady Ashby's smile faltered, and Hastings caught a fleeting glance between her and the vicar. "Well," she said, recovering, "it's certainly a curiosity. We shall view it tomorrow evening after dinner." The conversation turned to trivialities, weather, village gossip, the upcoming harvest festival, but Hastings felt the room's tension, like a violin string stretched to breaking. Poirot, sipping his tisane, appeared absorbed in the pattern of the Persian rug, but Hastings knew better. His friend was listening, observing, and piecing together the invisible threads that connected these people. Dinner was served at 7, a sumptuous affair of roast pheasant and claret, though the mood remained subdued. Gerald drank heavily, his remarks growing sharper, while Beatrice countered with barbed politeness. Dr. Redfern spoke little, his eyes darting to Lady Ashby with what Hastings thought might be concern. Miss Duval, poised and enigmatic, deflected questions about her past with practised ease. Reverend Hale offered bland platitudes, yet his fingers twisted a napkin with surprising force. As the meal ended, Lady Ashby rose. "I hope you'll all rest well. Tomorrow we'll explore the recipe book's secrets together." The guests dispersed to their rooms, and Hastings followed Poirot to the library, where a fire crackled invitingly. "Well, Poirot," he said, settling into an armchair, "what do you make of this lot?" A bit tense, but nothing out of the ordinary for a family gathering. Poirot steepled his fingers, his expression grave. "Ordinary, Hastings?" "No, there is a shadow in this house, a secret that festers. Did you not observe the glances, the hesitations? Lady Ashby fears something, perhaps the recipe book itself, and the others, they are not here by chance. Each has a motive, a desire, a fear. Tomorrow, mon ami, we shall see what this book reveals and what it conceals." Hastings shivered, though the room was warm. "You think there's trouble brewing?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Trouble, Hastings. Number. I think there is murder." The clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the silent manor, and Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more than the unveiling of an old recipe book. It would bring a puzzle worthy of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The morning sun struggled through a veil of mist that clung to Thornfield Grange, casting a pall over the estate as though nature itself sensed the impending storm. Captain Hastings, roused early by the unfamiliar creaks of the old house, stood at his bedroom window, gazing out at the dew-soaked lawns. The tranquillity of St. Aldwyn seemed a fragile illusion, strained by the undercurrents he had sensed the previous evening. Poirot's ominous words, "I think there is murder," echoed in his mind, and he shook his head, trying to dismiss them as his friend's penchant for the dramatic. Breakfast was served at 8 in the dining-room. A sombre affair, despite the gleaming silver and the aroma of fresh scones. Lady Ashby presided with her usual grace, but her eyes were shadowed, and her conversation was stilted. Gerald Ashby slouched in his chair, nursing a headache from the previous night's claret, while Beatrice, impeccable in a pale green dress, cut her toast with surgical precision. Dr. Redfern ate sparingly, his gaze fixed on his plate, and Miss Clara Duval maintained her air of quiet observation, her fork poised like a conductor's baton. Only Reverend Hale seemed unruffled, offering a gentle blessing over the meal that felt oddly out of place. Poirot, immaculate as ever, sipped his café au lait and made polite remarks about the Dorset scenery, but Hastings knew his friend was cataloguing every gesture, every pause. The detective's silence was a net, cast wide to catch the smallest ripple of deceit. The meal was interrupted by a sharp cry from the hall, followed by the clatter of a tray. The guests froze, and Lady Ashby rose, her face pale. "What on earth?" Before she could finish, the housekeeper, Mrs. Gibbs, burst into the room, her apron askew and her hands trembling. "My lady, it's dreadful!" "In the library. Oh, you must come at once." Hastings leapt to his feet, his military instincts kicking in, and Poirot followed with a measured calm that belied the urgency of the moment. The party hurried to the library, where a chilling scene awaited them. Sprawled across the Persian rug, near the fireplace where they had sat the previous evening, lay Dr. Lionel Redfern. His spectacles were askew, one lens cracked, and his face was frozen in a grimace of pain. A small glass vial, empty but for a faint residue lay beside his outstretched hand, and a faint bitter almond scent lingered in the air. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed, kneeling beside the body. "He's dead, isn't he?" Poirot, crouching with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, examined the scene without touching anything. His eyes darted from the vial to the doctor's rigid fingers, then to the untouched glass of water on a nearby table. "Oui, mon ami," he murmured. "Dead, and not by natural means, I think. The odour, it suggests cyanide, does it not?" Lady Ashby gasped, clutching the back of a chair for support. "Cyanide? But how? Why? Dr. Redfern was my physician, a trusted friend. Who could do such a thing?" Gerald Ashby, pale beneath his dishevelled hair, muttered, "Good Lord, Aunt Eleanor, are you saying someone poisoned him?" Beatrice's hand flew to her throat, and Miss Duval's eyes narrowed, though she said nothing. Reverend Hale clasped his hands, murmuring a prayer, but Hastings noticed the vicar's knuckles were white with tension. Poirot stood, brushing an imaginary speck from his sleeve. "We must not jump to conclusions, mes amis. The police must be summoned, and the scene preserved. Hastings, be so good as to ensure no one leaves this room until the authorities arrive." Hastings nodded, taking up a position by the door, though he felt a pang of unease at the thought of treating these people, guests in a respectable house, as suspects. Yet Poirot's authority was absolute, and the little Belgian was already pacing the room, his gaze sweeping over bookshelves, furniture, and the heavy velvet curtains. The local constable, a stout man named Sergeant Brooks, arrived within the hour, accompanied by a young inspector from Dorchester, Inspector Grange. The latter, with his sharp features and brisk manner, took charge at once, questioning each guest with a mix of deference and suspicion. Hastings watched as Poirot hovered on the periphery, his silence more commanding than the inspector's bluster. Dr. Redfern was found at approximately 7:45 a.m. Inspector Grange began, consulting his notebook. "Mrs. Gibbs discovered him when she brought the morning tea. Can each of you account for your movements between, say, midnight and 7:30 a.m.? Lady Ashby, seated rigidly on a sofa, spoke first. "I retired to my room at 10 last night and did not leave until breakfast. My maid, Ellen, can confirm I was in my quarters." Gerald Ashby shrugged, his voice sullen. "I was in my room by 11, dead to the world after too much wine. Beatrice can vouch for me. She was there." Beatrice nodded, though her eyes avoided her husband's. "I was asleep by 11:30. I heard nothing unusual." Miss Duval's voice was calm, almost detached. "I was in my room, working on correspondence for Lady Ashby until midnight. After that I slept. My room is on the second floor, near the servants' stairs." Reverend Hale clasped his prayer book. "I was in my room by 10, reading scripture until perhaps 11. I heard no disturbances. Hastings, when questioned, confirmed that he and Poirot had retired to their guest rooms shortly after 9, and he had slept soundly until morning." Poirot, with a slight smile, corroborated this, adding, "I, Hercule Poirot, am a light sleeper, yet I heard nothing to suggest foul play." "But the mind, it works even in repose, does it not?" Inspector Grange frowned, clearly unaccustomed to such cryptic remarks. "Right. Well, the coroner will confirm the cause of death, but that vial and the smell point to poison. Cyanide acts quickly, minutes, sometimes seconds. Whoever did this knew what they were about." As the inspector continued his inquiries, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Observe, mon ami," he whispered. "The alibis are neat, too neat. Everyone claims to have been asleep, yet someone entered this library and administered death. The vial, it is a clue, but not the only one. Look at the table." Hastings followed Poirot's gaze to the small table near the body, where the glass of water stood. Beside it was an open book, not the recipe book, but a medical journal, its pages marked with a ribbon. "Redfern was reading this?" Hastings asked. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, "or perhaps it was placed there. The journal is open to an article on toxicology. Curious, non? And see, the glass of water is untouched, yet the vial is empty. If Dr. Redfern took his own life, why the glass? If he was poisoned, how was it done without a struggle?" Hastings shook his head, baffled. "You think the killer staged this to look like suicide?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I think, Hastings, that we are dealing with a mind that plans with care. The recipe book, it was to be unveiled tonight. I wonder, is it merely a family heirloom, or does it hold a secret worth killing for?" The morning wore on, with the police cordoning off the library and the guests confined to the drawing-room under Sergeant Brooks's watchful eye. Lady Ashby, visibly shaken, excused herself to consult with her housekeeper, while Gerald lit another cigarette, his hands unsteady. Beatrice and Miss Duval exchanged a brief, unreadable glance, and Reverend Hale sat apart, his lips moving in silent prayer. Poirot, undeterred by the sombre mood, began his own investigation, moving through the house with the precision of a metronome. He examined the library's windows locked, the fireplace cold, and the bookshelves undisturbed. In a corner, he paused at a small writing desk, where a single sheet of paper bore a faint pencil mark, a series of numbers, 12:15, 2:30, 40. "Times, Hastings," he murmured. "But for what? A meeting, a plan, or a record of something observed?" By noon the coroner arrived, confirming Poirot's suspicion. Cyanide poisoning, likely administered within the last 12 hours. The vial, wiped clean of fingerprints, offered no immediate clues. Inspector Grange, frustrated by the lack of obvious evidence, turned to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, you've a reputation for solving puzzles. Any thoughts?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Thoughts, Inspector?" "Oh, many, but they are like the pieces of a mosaic, scattered, yet forming a picture. Permit me to reflect, and we shall see what the little grey cells uncover." As the household settled into an uneasy quiet, Hastings felt the weight of Poirot's words. The murder of Dr. Redfern was no random act. It was a calculated move in a game whose rules were still hidden. And somewhere in Thornfield Grange, among the polite facades and whispered secrets, a killer waited, believing their crime undetectable. But they had not reckoned with Hercule Poirot. Chapter 3. The arrival of Hercule. Sir Poirot. The mist had lifted by midday, but a heavy silence lingered over Thornfield Grange, as though the house itself mourned the violent death within its walls. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched as the coroner's van trundled down the gravel drive, bearing Doctor Redfern's body to Dorchester for further examination. The scene felt unreal, a stark contrast to the genteel hospitality of the previous evening. He glanced at Hercule Poirot, who sat in a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the room. To the untrained observer, Poirot might have appeared idle. But Hastings knew his friend's mind was a whirlwind of calculation, piecing together the fragments of the morning's tragedy. Inspector Grange, still present with the diligent Sergeant Brooks, had taken statements and now paced the room, his frustration palpable. "A devil of a case," he muttered, flipping through his notebook. "No fingerprints, no witnesses, and everyone with an alibi as tidy as a Sunday sermon. Monsieur Poirot, you're sure you've nothing to add?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or irritation. Hastings could never quite tell. "Patience, Inspector," he replied, his voice smooth as polished oak. "The truth, it does not reveal itself to those who rush." Hercule Poirot observes, reflects, and then, voila, the picture becomes clear. "For now, I suggest you permit me to speak with the household. There are inconsistencies to explore." Grange raised an eyebrow but nodded, perhaps sensing that Poirot's reputation was not mere bluster. "Very well, but I'll need results, not riddles. Sergeant, keep an eye on the guests." As the inspector departed to confer with the coroner, Poirot rose, brushing an imaginary speck from his impeccable suit. "Come, Hastings," he said softly, "let us begin the work of the little grey cells. We shall speak with each person in turn, and we shall listen, not only to their words, but to what they do not say." Hastings followed, his curiosity tinged with unease. Poirot's method, so unlike the straightforward interrogations of the police, had an almost surgical precision, cutting through layers of politeness to expose the raw nerves beneath. They began with Lady Ashby, who awaited them in her private sitting room, a cosy space adorned with chintz curtains and a portrait of her late husband, Sir Reginald Ashby. Lady Ashby sat erect, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady but strained, "this is a terrible shock. Dr. Redfern was a dear friend, my physician for years. I cannot fathom why anyone would harm him." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes fixed on her. "Madame, I sympathize with your distress. But permit me to ask, Doctor. Redfern, he was close to your family, yes? He knew your secrets, perhaps, your history." Lady Ashby's lips tightened. "He was discreet, if that's what you mean. He attended to my health and occasionally advised on family matters, but nothing untoward." "And this recipe book," Poirot continued, his tone light but probing, "it is of great significance to you. Why unveil it now with such a gathering?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "It was a whim, really. I found it in the attic last month, hidden in an old trunk. I thought it would be a charming diversion, a way to honor the Ashby legacy. I invited those closest to me to share in the occasion." Poirot nodded, though his expression suggested he found her answer incomplete. "And Dr. Redfern, he was interested in this book. He spoke of its medicinal value, I believe, yes," she admitted. "He was curious about the recipes, especially those with herbal remedies. He said they might reveal old medical practices." Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook. "Merci, Lady Ashby. You have been most helpful. One final question. Last night, did you hear anything unusual after retiring?" "Nothing," she said firmly. "I was asleep by 10, as I told the inspector." They took their leave, and Hastings whispered, "She seemed nervous, Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something?" "Everyone hides something, mon ami," Poirot replied. "The question is whether it is relevant to murder." Next, they sought Gerald Ashby, who was lounging in the billiard room, a cigarette smouldering between his fingers. His dishevelled appearance and bloodshot eyes spoke of a restless night. "Look here, Poirot," he said brusquely. "I don't know what you're fishing for, but I had no quarrel with Redfern. Decent chap, if a bit dull." I was in bed by 11. As I said, Poirot's smile was disarming. "Monsieur Ashby, you are a man of strong passions, yes? You inherit from your aunt, perhaps, if she has no children?" Gerald's eyes narrowed. "What's that got to do with anything? Aunt Eleanor's got years left, and I'm not starving for cash, if that's what you're implying." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft as velvet, "money, it is a powerful motive. Dr. Redfern, he knew something of your affairs, perhaps? A debt, a secret?" Gerald stubbed out his cigarette with force. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. I didn't like the man poking about my business, but I didn't kill him." As they left, Hastings murmured, "He's defensive, isn't he? And that inheritance angle. Do you think he's after Lady Ashby's fortune?" Poirot shrugged. "It is possible. But the motive, it must fit the method. Cyanide is not the weapon of a hot-tempered man like Gerald. It requires planning, precision. They found Beatrice Ashby in the conservatory, tending to a potted orchid with exaggerated care. Her beauty, Hastings noted, was marred by a tightness around her eyes, as though she carried a private burden. "Mrs. Ashby," Poirot began, "you and your husband, you are happy together, yes?" Beatrice's laugh was brittle. "As happy as most, I suppose. Gerald has his faults, but don't we all?" "Indeed," Poirot said. "Dr. Redfern, he was your physician also? He knew of your health, your personal matters?" She flushed slightly. "He treated me for nerves, if you must know." "Nothing serious. As for personal matters, I keep those to myself." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her trembling fingers. "And last night you were with your husband until morning?" "Yes," she said quickly. "We retired together." I heard nothing until Mrs. Gibbs's scream Miss Clara Duval was next, found in the study, sorting through a stack of letters. Her composure was impeccable, her dark eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "Monsieur Poirot," she said in her faint French accent, "I am merely Lady Ashby's secretary. I have no secrets to hide, yet you observe everything," Poirot countered. "You are, I think, a woman of intelligence. Did you notice anything unusual about Dr. Redfern last night? A worry, perhaps?" She hesitated, then said, "He seemed preoccupied during dinner." He kept glancing at Lady Ashby, as though concerned for her, but he said nothing to me. "And the recipe book?" Poirot pressed. "You spoke of its secrets." "What did you mean?" Miss Duval's lips curved slightly. "Only that old books often hold more than recipes. Family scandals, perhaps. I meant nothing specific. Finally, they spoke with Reverend Hale in the garden, where he stood pruning a rosebush. His serene demeanour faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. "I am a man of God, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "I seek only to comfort Lady Ashby in her grief." "Yet you are not without secrets," Poirot said gently. "Last night you read scripture until 11. Did you hear nothing? No footsteps, no voices?" The vicar's hands stilled. "Nothing, I assure you." The house was silent. As they returned to the drawing-room, Hastings felt a growing sense of disquiet. "They're all so guarded, Poirot. It's as if they're hiding something, but what?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "They hide many things, Hastings. But one of them hides a murder. The recipe book, I think, is the key. Dr. Redfern knew something, perhaps something written in its pages, that made him dangerous. We must see this book, and soon the afternoon brought no immediate answers. But Poirot's quiet confidence reassured Hastings. As the guests gathered for a tense luncheon, the detective's gaze swept over them, missing nothing. The stage was set, the players in place, and Hercule Poirot was ready to unravel the threads of a crime that for now remained cloaked in shadow. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The afternoon at Thornfield Grange settled into a restless quiet, the kind that follows a storm when the air is thick with unspoken questions. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room, felt the weight of the morning's tragedy pressing upon the house. The murder of Dr. Lionel Redfern had cast a shadow over the gathered company, and though the police had come and gone, their inquiries had yielded little beyond alibis and denials. Hercule Poirot, however, was undeterred, his small figure radiating a calm authority as he prepared to probe deeper into the mystery. Poirot had requested a private audience with each guest, and now, as the grandfather clock chimed 2, he began his methodical interviews in the library, where the scent of cyanide still lingered faintly, though the body had been removed. The room, with its towering bookshelves and heavy drapes, felt oppressive to Hastings, who stood by the door, notebook in hand, ready to record Poirot's observations. The detective's approach, as always, was deceptively gentle, his questions cloaked in courtesy, but sharp as a scalpel. First to be summoned was Mrs. Gibbs, the housekeeper, a stout woman in her 50s whose ruddy cheeks betrayed her agitation. She twisted her apron as she sat, her eyes darting nervously to the spot where Dr. Redfern had been found. "Madam Gibbs," Poirot began, his voice soothing, "you are the heart of this household, are you not? You see all, hear all? Tell me, what did you observe last night, after the guests retired?" Mrs. Gibbs swallowed hard. "I was in the kitchen, sir, tidying up after dinner." "It was near 10 when I finished. I checked the doors, locked as always, and went to my room in the servants' wing. I heard nothing unusual, not a peep, until I found him this morning." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "And Dr. Redfern, he was a frequent visitor to Thornfield Grange. Did he ever speak of the recipe book, or of Lady Ashby's family?" "He was here often, sir, for Lady Ashby's health," Mrs. Gibbs replied. "He'd ask about the family, casual-like, but nothing about the recipe book. Though," she hesitated, her fingers tightening on her apron. "Though?" Poirot prompted, leaning forward. "Well, sir, yesterday afternoon I saw him in the hall, looking at the family portraits. He seemed troubled, like he was searching for something. I thought it odd, but he was a curious sort, always asking questions." Poirot nodded, making a note. "Merci, Madame Gibbs. You have been most helpful. One last thing. Did you prepare the tea tray for Dr. Redfern this morning?" "No, sir," she said quickly. "I brought it to the library, as he often worked there early, but Ellen, the maid, prepared it. She's a good girl, sir, wouldn't harm a fly." After Mrs. Gibbs departed, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The housekeeper, she is loyal, but she protects someone. Perhaps the maid, perhaps Lady Ashby. We shall see." Next came Ellen, the maid, a nervous girl of 19 with wide eyes and trembling hands. She confirmed preparing the tea tray at 7:30 a.m., but insisted she had seen nothing amiss. "I left it outside the library door, sir," she said. "Dr. Redfern liked his privacy in the mornings. I didn't go in until Mrs. Gibbs screamed Poirot's questions were gentle but relentless. And last night, Mademoiselle Ellen, did you see anyone near the library? Or hear anything, a voice, a footstep? Ellen shook her head vigorously. No, sir. I was in my room by 9:30 reading. The servants' quarters are far from the library, sir. As Ellen left, Hastings murmured, She's terrified, Poirot. Do you think she's lying? Not lying, perhaps, Poirot replied, but withholding. Fear, Hastings. It is a powerful silencer. Now, let us speak with Mademoiselle Duval again. Clara Duval entered with her characteristic poise. Her dark hair swept into a neat bun, her expression unreadable. Poirot offered her a seat, his demeanour courteous but probing. Mademoiselle, you are close to Lady Ashby, yes. You know her secrets, her fears. Tell me, what is it about this recipe book that causes such tension? Miss Duval's lips curved faintly. You are perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. The book is more than recipes. It contains notes, private ones written by Cassandra Ashby. Lady Ashby mentioned them to me in passing, but she was vague. I think she fears what they reveal, and Dr. Redfern, Poirot continued, he was interested in these notes. Perhaps, she said, he asked to see the book yesterday before dinner, but Lady Ashby said it would wait until the unveiling. He seemed impatient. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Impatient, you say? And you, mademoiselle, did you see him after dinner, perhaps in the library? Her gaze met his steadily. No, monsieur. I was in my room, as I told you. I saw no one after midnight. As Miss Duval departed, Poirot tapped his pencil against his notebook. She is clever, Hastings, and careful. She knows more than she says, but she will not be pressed, not yet. Gerald Ashby was next, his demeanour a mix of irritation and unease. He slumped into the chair, lighting a cigarette despite Poirot's subtle frown. Look, Poirot, I don't know what you're after. I didn't like Redfern poking into my business, but I didn't kill him. Why would I? Poirot's smile was disarming. Why, indeed? But let us consider, Monsieur Ashby. You are in need of funds, perhaps. Dr. Redfern, he knew of your debts. Gerald's face reddened. That's private, damn it. Yes, I've had a rough patch. Bad investments, cards, that sort of thing. But Aunt Eleanor's been generous, and Redfern had nothing to do with it. And last night, Poirot pressed, you were in your room with Madame Ashby. You heard nothing? Nothing, Gerald snapped. I was out cold. Ask Beatrice. Beatrice Ashby followed, her elegance marred by a nervous tick in her jaw. She confirmed Gerald's alibi, but added little. Her answers clipped. Dr. Redfern was kind, she said, but distant. I had no reason to harm him. Poirot leaned forward. Madam, you are troubled. Is there something you wish to share? A confidence, perhaps, that doctor Redfern held? Her eyes flickered with alarm, but she shook her head. No, monsieur. I told you, I was asleep by 11:30. Finally, Reverend Hale entered, his prayer book clutched like a shield. Poirot's questions were gentle but incisive. Reverend, you are a man of peace, yet you are uneasy. Did Dr. Redfern confide in you, perhaps, about the recipe book? Hale's lips tightened. He mentioned it in passing, said it might contain sensitive information about the Ashby family. But he was vague, and I thought little of it. And last night, Poirot asked, you heard nothing? Nothing, Hale said, his voice firm, but his eyes avoiding Poirot's. As the interviews concluded, Poirot led Hastings to the garden for a private word. What do you make of it, Poirot? Hastings asked. They all stick to their stories, but there's something off. Off indeed, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the rose bushes. Each has a secret, Hastings, and each fears the recipe book. Dr. Redfern knew something, perhaps a scandal, perhaps a crime, hidden in its pages. The times on that paper, 12:15, 2:30, 40. They are a clue, but to what? A meeting? A murder? We must see this book, and we must watch these people. The killer is among them, and they grow careless in their fear. The afternoon waned, and the house seemed to close in upon itself, its secrets locked as tightly as the library's windows. Hastings felt a chill, knowing that Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, unravelling the threads of a crime that grew more complex with each passing hour. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Thornfield Grange, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the unease permeating the house. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room, felt the weight of suspicion settling over the gathered guests like a fog. The murder of Dr. Lionel Redfern had transformed the polite gathering into a nest of secrets, and Hercule Poirot's quiet presence only heightened the tension. Hastings watched his friend who sat with a cup of tisane, his eyes half closed but missing nothing, as the household awaited the next development in the grim affair. Inspector Grange had returned from Dorchester with news. The coroner's preliminary report confirmed cyanide poisoning, with death occurring between midnight and 4 a.m. The vial found beside Redfern's body bore no fingerprints, and the library showed no signs of forced entry. This left the inspector visibly frustrated, and he now focused his attention on Gerald Ashby, whose financial troubles and brusque manner made him an obvious suspect. "Mr. Ashby," Grange began, standing before the fireplace where Gerald slouched with a cigarette, "you've admitted to debts and Doctor. Redfern knew of them. Did he threaten to expose you to Lady Ashby, perhaps cut you off?" Gerald's face reddened, and he stubbed out his cigarette with a scowl. "That's absurd, Inspector. Redfern was a busybody, sure, but I didn't kill him. I was in bed, as I've said a dozen times, Wolf. Ask Beatrice. She'll tell you." Beatrice, seated nearby, nodded stiffly. "It's true, Inspector." "Gerald was with me all night." Hastings caught a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a fleeting shadow that suggested her confirmation was not entirely heartfelt. Poirot, too, noticed, his moustache twitching as he leaned forward slightly. "Madam Ashby," he said, his voice gentle, "you are certain of this?" "The night it is long, and sleep it is not always continuous." Beatrice's fingers tightened on her pearl necklace. I was asleep, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't notice anything unusual." Inspector Grange, undeterred, pressed Gerald further. "You were seen arguing with Doctor." "Redfern 2 days ago in the village. Mr. Ashby, a witness at the post office, heard raised voices. Care to explain?" Gerald's jaw clenched. "It was nothing. Redfern was lecturing me about my habits, drinking, cards. Said it wasn't good for Aunt Eleanor's nerves. I told him to mind his own business. A heated exchange," Grange said, jotting in his notebook. "And now he's dead." Convenient, wouldn't you say? Lady Ashby, who had been listening in silence, rose abruptly. "Inspector, I must protest. Gerald is my nephew, and while he may be reckless, he is no murderer. I beg you to look elsewhere." Grange's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Poirot interjected, his tone deceptively mild. "Inspector, if I may, let us not be too hasty. The obvious suspect, he is often the least likely. Monsieur Gérald, he is impulsive, yes, but cyanide. It is a method of calculation, of premeditation. We must consider all possibilities. Hastings marvelled at Poirot's ability to steer the conversation, planting doubt without seeming to accuse anyone. The inspector, though clearly sceptical, nodded grudgingly. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot. But I'll be keeping a close eye on Mr. Ashby." As Grange moved to question Miss Clara Duval, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "Mon ami, the inspector. He sees only the surface, Gerald's debts, his temper. These are red herrings designed to distract. The true killer is more subtle, more cunning. We must look beyond the obvious. But Gerald does seem the likely sort," Hastings protested. "He's in debt, and Redfern was meddling in his affairs." Motive and opportunity, surely. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Opportunity perhaps, but motive? No. Gerald's faults are plain, but murder by poison requires a hidden depth. Observe the others, Hastings. Miss Duval, she watches too closely. Madame Beatrice, she conceals a fear. And the Reverend Hale, his serenity is a mask. And then there is the recipe book. Why does it loom so large in this tragedy? The mention of the recipe book prompted Poirot to request its examination. Lady Ashby, though hesitant, agreed to retrieve it from her private safe, where it had been locked since its discovery. She led Poirot, Hastings, and the inspector to her study, a small room lined with books and family portraits. From a wall safe behind a painting of Sir Reginald Ashby, she produced a leather-bound volume, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. The title, embossed in faded gold, read, "Cassandra Ashby's Receipts and Reflections, 1812. "It's fragile," Lady Ashby said, handling it with care. "Cassandra was my great-grandmother, a woman of strong character. Her notes go beyond recipes. There are personal entries, family matters." Poirot's gloved hands took the book reverently, his fingers tracing the cover. "May I examine it, madame? It may hold a clue to Dr. Redfern's fate." With Lady Ashby's permission, Poirot opened the book, revealing pages filled with elegant script. Recipes for plum pudding and elderflower cordial, mingled with cryptic notes. "The debt must be settled, lest it ruin us all. And the truth lies buried, but not forgotten." One entry, dated 1815, caught Poirot's eye. "The tonic for R.A. must be prepared with care. Too much, and it is fatal." "R.A.?" Poirot murmured. "Reginald Ashby, perhaps. Or another. And this tonic, what was its purpose?" Lady Ashby paled. "I don't know, Monsieur Poirot." I hadn't read that far. Dr. Redfern was eager to study it, though. He said it might reveal historical medical practices. Inspector Grange, peering over Poirot's shoulder, scoffed. "Sounds like a lot of old nonsense to me. How does this help us find a killer?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, Inspector. The past, it speaks to the present. This book, it is a map to the motives of those in this house." As they returned to the drawing room, the guests' reactions to the book's mention were telling. Gerald looked bored, Beatrice anxious, Miss Duval curious, and Reverend Hale oddly detached, his fingers tracing the edge of his prayer book. Hastings noted these responses, wondering which concealed guilt. Later, as the guests dispersed for tea, Poirot confided in Hastings. "The book, it is the key, but not in the way we expect. Dr. Redfern was killed to silence something he discovered. Perhaps a secret in these pages, perhaps a connection to someone here. The times on that paper, 12:15, 2:30, 40. They are a schedule, a record of the killer's movements, or a witness's observation. We must find who wrote them. Hastings frowned. But everyone's alibi covers those hours. Could the paper be unrelated? Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. In a case such as this, nothing is unrelated. The red herrings, Gerald's debts, his argument with Redfern, they distract from the truth. The killer wishes us to look at Gerald, but we must look elsewhere. As evening approached, the house grew tense, the guests avoiding each other's eyes. Inspector Grange, convinced of Gerald's guilt, stationed Sergeant Brooks to watch him. But Poirot's focus remained on the broader picture. He requested a map of the house from Mrs. Gibbs, studying its layout with meticulous care. The library's proximity to the servants' stairs, the guests' rooms, the locked windows. The answer lies in the details, he told Hastings. A gesture, a word, a moment out of place. By dinner the atmosphere was strained, the clink of cutlery sounding like accusations. Gerald drank heavily. Beatrice picked at her food, and Miss Duval's calm seemed forced. Reverend Hale offered a prayer for Doctor. Redfern's soul, but his voice trembled. Lady Ashby, presiding over the meal, announced that the recipe book's unveiling would be postponed, a decision met with uneasy silence. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot whispered to Hastings, "The killer grows nervous, mon ami. They see that Hercule Poirot is not deceived by their distractions. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net." Hastings nodded, feeling the weight of the mystery. The red herrings had clouded the truth, but Poirot's clarity was unwavering. Somewhere in Thornfield Grange, a murderer hid, believing their crime perfect. But they had not reckoned with the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning of Sunday, August 24th, 1925, dawned with a brittle clarity, the sun piercing the mist that had cloaked Thornfield Grange for 2 days. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused by the distant chime of the village church bells, felt the weight of the unresolved murder pressing upon him. The death of Doctor. Lionel Redfern lingered like a stain on the manor's elegance, and the guests' strained politeness only deepened the sense of unease. Hercule Poirot, however, appeared invigorated, his eyes bright with the thrill of the chase as he sipped his morning coffee in the breakfast room. "Mon ami," Poirot said, setting down his cup with precision, "today we shall find a crack in the facade. The killer, they grow careless, and in their carelessness they leave a clue, a detail that will betray them." Hastings, buttering a piece of toast, frowned. "You're awfully confident, Poirot." The inspector's still fixated on Gerald, and those alibis are airtight. What sort of clue are you expecting? Poirot's moustache twitched. The smallest detail, Hastings, can be the loudest voice. A gesture, a word, a moment out of place. The little grey cells, they are attuned to such things. Come, we shall revisit the library. The library, though no longer a crime scene, remained sealed by Inspector Grange's orders, but Poirot had persuaded the sergeant to allow a brief examination. The room was as they had left it, save for the absence of Dr. Redfern's body. The Persian rug bore a faint mark where he had fallen, and the small table still held the untouched glass of water and the medical journal, open to an article on toxicology. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the writing desk where he had found the cryptic paper with the times 12:15, 2:30, 4:00. He approached the desk, his gloved fingers tracing its surface. "This paper," he murmured, holding it to the light, "it is not ordinary. See, Hastings, the texture. It is of fine quality, not the sort used by servants, and the pencil mark, it is faint but deliberate. Someone wrote these times with care." Hastings peered at the paper. "But what do they mean?" "Meeting times? A schedule?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps a record of observation." Someone saw something at these hours, or wished us to believe they did. We must test this. Poirot's attention shifted to the medical journal. He flipped through its pages, pausing at a passage underlined in pencil. "Cyanide, when ingested, acts within minutes, often leaving a bitter almond odor." Beside it, in the margin, was a faint scribble. "Check dosage." "Curious," Poirot said. "Dr. Redfern, he was studying cyanide before his death. Did he suspect danger, or was this placed to mislead us?" Hastings frowned. "You think the killer tampered with the journal?" "No, Hastings. I think the killer is clever, but not infallible. This note, it is too convenient. Let us examine further." Poirot moved to the fireplace, where a small pile of ash caught his eye. He knelt, using a handkerchief to collect a fragment. "Ash, Hastings, but not from a fire. The grate is cold. This is paper, burned recently, and see, a trace of ink remains." He held up a charred scrap, barely legible, bearing the word Ashby. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed. "Part of a letter, perhaps. Someone burned evidence?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "But why burn it here, in the library, where it might be found? The killer. They are bold or desperate. We must speak with the household again." Their next stop was the servants' quarters, where Poirot questioned Ellen, the maid, with renewed focus. She stood by the kitchen, her hands clasped tightly, as Poirot asked, "Mademoiselle Ellen, you prepared Doctor Redfern's tea tray. Did you notice anything unusual in the library when you left it outside the door?" Ellen's eyes widened. "No, sir. I just set the tray down at 7:30 like always. The door was closed, and I didn't hear anything." "And this paper," Poirot said, showing her a blank sheet of the same quality as the one with the times. "Do you recognize it? Is it used in the household?" Ellen hesitated, then nodded. "It's from Lady Ashby's stationery, sir. She keeps it in her study for letters. But I don't know how it got in the library." Poirot thanked her and moved on to Mrs. Gibbs, who was polishing silver in the pantry. "Madam Gibbs," he said, "the library fireplace, when was it last cleaned?" Mrs. Gibbs frowned. "Yesterday morning, sir, before breakfast. I swept it myself." There was no fire lit since Poirot's eyes gleamed. "So, the ash we found, it is new. Someone burned something after Dr. Redfern's death. Merci, madame." As they returned to the main house, Hastings said, "The ash and the paper, they point to someone with access to Lady Ashby's stationery. But who? And why burn something in the library?" Poirot's expression was grave. "The library, it is the heart of this mystery. Dr. Redfern was killed there, and the killer returned to destroy evidence. But they left a clue. The ash. It is a mistake, Hastings, and mistakes are fatal to the criminal mind." Back in the drawing room, the guests were gathered, their faces a study in tension. Inspector Grange, still focused on Gerald, was questioning him about his whereabouts at 2:30 a.m., one of the times on the paper. Gerald's temper flared. "I told you, I was asleep." "Why don't you ask someone else for a change?" Poirot interjected smoothly. "Monsieur Gerald, your indignation, it is noted. But let us consider another matter. The recipe book. Have any of you seen it since yesterday?" Lady Ashby, startled, said, "It's in my safe, Monsieur Poirot. I locked it there after you examined it, yet Dr. Redfern was eager to study it," Poirot said. "Did he speak to any of you about its contents?" Miss Duval's eyes flickered. He mentioned it to me briefly, as I said. He thought it might contain medical recipes of interest. Reverend Hale cleared his throat. He asked me if I knew of any Ashby family scandals from Cassandra's time. I told him I was not a historian, only a vicar. Beatrice shifted uncomfortably, and Gerald muttered, "Waste of time, that book." Just old scribbles. Poirot's gaze lingered on each face, as though weighing their words against an invisible scale. "The book, it holds a secret worth killing for. Dr. Redfern, he discovered something, perhaps a truth about the Ashby family, perhaps a connection to one of you. We shall see." As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The clue, Hastings. It is in the details. The ash, the stationery, the times. Someone in this house wrote those times, burned that paper, and poisoned Doctor Redfern. The recipe book. It is the thread that ties it all together. We must examine it again, but with care, for the killer watches us." Hastings felt a chill, despite the warmth of the room. "You think the killer will strike again?" Poirot's eyes were steely. "If they feel threatened, yes. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily outwitted. The little grey cells, they are awake, and they see what others miss." The day wore on, with the household under a pall of suspicion. The clue in the ash, the cryptic times, and the recipe book's hidden secrets loomed large, and Hastings knew that Poirot was closing in on the truth, one meticulous detail at a time. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The atmosphere at Thornfield Grange grew heavier. As Sunday afternoon waned, the weight of Dr. Lionel Redfern's murder pressing upon the household like an unyielding fog. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched the shadows lengthen across the lawn, their creeping advance mirroring the unease that gnawed at him. Hercule Poirot, seated nearby with his notebook open, seemed unaffected by the tension, his pen moving with the precision of a watchmaker as he recorded observations. Yet Hastings knew his friend's calm was a facade, concealing a mind that churned through the labyrinth of clues with relentless focus. Inspector Grange, still fixated on Gerald Ashby, had spent the morning interrogating the servants about Gerald's movements, but his efforts yielded little beyond vague confirmations of the household's routines. Poirot, however, had other plans. "Mon ami," he said, closing his notebook with a snap, "the time has come to stir the waters. The killer, they hide behind lies, but lies, they crumble under scrutiny. We shall provoke, and we shall observe." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Provoke? You mean to rattle someone into slipping up?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "The truth, it is like a bird in a cage. It flutters when the door is opened." "Let us open the door." Poirot requested that Lady Ashby gather the guests in the drawing-room, ostensibly to discuss the recipe book's significance. As they assembled, their faces betrayed a mix of curiosity and dread. Lady Ashby, pale but composed, sat by the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly. Gerald lounged with forced nonchalance, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Beatrice, her blonde hair catching the light, toyed with her necklace, her eyes darting nervously. Miss Clara Duval maintained her enigmatic calm, while Reverend Hale clutched his prayer book, his serenity strained. Poirot stood before them, his small stature commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "the death of Dr. Redfern is no accident, no suicide. It is murder, planned with care. And the key, I believe, lies in the recipe book of Cassandra Ashby. This book, it holds secrets, not only of culinary arts, but of the heart, the past, the sins of the Ashby family." Lady Ashby stiffened. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, the book is merely a family heirloom. Its notes are personal, yes, but hardly sinister. Poirot's smile was gentle, but unyielding. Yet Dr. Redfern, he was eager to study it. He believed it contained a truth worth killing for. Let us consider, what did he find? A scandal? A debt? A betrayal? Gerald snorted, flicking ash into a tray. This is nonsense, Poirot. Redfern was a meddler, but he wasn't digging up family dirt. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Beatrice's voice was sharp. Gerald, please. Let Monsieur Poirot speak. Poirot's gaze shifted to her. Madame Ashby, you are uneasy. Dr. Redfern, he treated you for nerves, yes? Did he know something of your marriage, perhaps? A secret you wished to keep hidden? Beatrice's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. I told you, he was my doctor, nothing more. Miss Duval interjected, her tone cool. Monsieur Poirot, you suggest the book holds a motive for murder? But we have not seen it. How can we know what Dr. Redfern discovered? A fair question, Poirot said, turning to Lady Ashby. Madame, may we examine the book again? Its pages, they may speak where human tongues are silent. With a reluctant nod, Lady Ashby retrieved the book from her safe, handing it to Poirot with visible trepidation. He opened it carefully, his gloved fingers turning the brittle pages. The guests watched, their tension palpable, as Poirot paused at a particular entry, dated 1815. The tonic for R.A. must be prepared with care. Too much, and it is fatal. The secret must be kept, lest it destroy the family. This, Poirot said, holding up the book, is no mere recipe. It speaks of a tonic, a danger, a secret. Who is R.A.? Reginald Ashby, perhaps, or another? And why was Dr. Redfern so eager to read this? Lady Ashby's voice trembled. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I hadn't read that passage closely. It's unsettling. Reverend Hale cleared his throat. Cassandra Ashby lived in turbulent times. Her notes may reflect personal fears, not facts. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet Dr. Redfern believed otherwise. And someone in this room knows why the accusation hung in the air. And Hastings saw the guests shift uncomfortably. Gerald's cigarette trembled in his hand. Beatrice's fingers tightened on her necklace, and Miss Duval's calm seemed to waver. Reverend Hale's lips moved silently, as though in prayer, but his eyes were fixed on the book. Poirot continued, his voice soft but relentless. Let us consider the lies that have surfaced. Monsieur Gerald, you claim to have been asleep, yet your debts suggest a desperate man. Madame Beatrice, you confirm his alibi, but your hesitation betrays doubt. Mademoiselle Duval, you know more of this book than you admit. And Reverend Hale, your serenity conceals a fear. Someone here has lied, and that lie hides a murderer. The room erupted in protest. Gerald leapt to his feet, his face flushed. Damn it, Poirot! You've no right to accuse us all. I didn't touch Redfern, and I won't stand for this. Beatrice's voice was shrill. You're twisting things, Monsieur Poirot. I've told the truth. Miss Duval remained silent, her eyes locked on Poirot, while Reverend Hale murmured, Peace, please. Let us not descend into chaos. Lady Ashby, her composure fraying, said, Monsieur Poirot, I beg you, find the truth without... Tearing us apart, Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The truth, madame, it will emerge. But first, we must face the lies. Someone in this house burned a paper in the library fireplace, a paper with the name Ashby. Someone wrote times, 12:15, 2:30, 40, on fine stationery. These are not accidents. They are the footprints of a killer. As the guests absorbed this, Hastings noticed a subtle shift. Beatrice's hand dropped from her necklace, her face pale. Gerald's anger seemed to mask fear, and Miss Duval's fingers twitched, as though resisting an urge to speak. Reverend Hale's prayer book slipped from his grasp, landing with a soft thud. Inspector Grange, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Monsieur Poirot, you're stirring up a hornet's nest. If you've evidence, let's hear it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Evidence, Inspector? It is here in the words, the glances, the lies. But I require one more piece. A confirmation from the recipe book. Madam Ashby, may I keep it for further study?" Reluctantly, Lady Ashby agreed, and Poirot tucked the book under his arm. As the guests dispersed, their unease palpable, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The lies, Hastings, they're like cracks in a dam. One push, and the truth will flood out. The book, it holds the motive, a scandal, perhaps that, Doctor. Redfern uncovered. And the times, they are a timeline of betrayal." Hastings frowned. "But who wrote those times? And what was burned?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The paper was Lady Ashby's stationery, but the hand that wrote it, I suspect it was not hers. The ash, it contained the name Ashby. A letter perhaps, or a confession, destroyed to protect the killer. We must watch closely, for the killer grows anxious." As evening approached, the house seemed to close in upon itself, the secrets within its walls growing heavier. Hastings felt a chill, knowing that Poirot's probing had shaken the murderer's confidence. The lies were surfacing, and with them the truth drew nearer, but so, too, did the danger. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The evening of Sunday, August 24th, 1925, descended upon Thornfield Grange with a quiet that felt more oppressive than serene. The murder of Dr. Lionel Redfern had fractured the household's veneer of civility, and the guests, now confined to the manor under Inspector Grange's orders, moved with the wariness of chess pieces in a game they did not fully understand. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room, felt the tension like a taut wire, ready to snap. Hercule Poirot, however, remained composed, his small figure exuding a calm certainty as he clutched Cassandra Ashby's recipe book, its worn leather cover a silent witness to the secrets it held. The day's interrogations had stirred the household, and Poirot's accusations, veiled though they were, had left the guests on edge. Hastings watched them now, gathered for an uneasy dinner, their faces illuminated by the flickering candelabra. Lady Ashby, at the head of the table, picked at her food, her eyes darting to the recipe book, which Poirot had placed conspicuously beside his plate. Gerald Ashby, his temper fraying, drank heavily, his hand unsteady as he reached for his glass. Beatrice, pale and silent, avoided her husband's gaze, her fingers twisting a napkin into knots. Miss Clara Duval maintained her enigmatic poise, but her dark eyes flickered with something akin to unease. Reverend Hale, usually serene, seemed distracted, his fork pausing mid-air as though lost in thought. Poirot, ever the orchestrator, broke the silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the clink of cutlery. "The recipe book, it is a remarkable document. It speaks not only of culinary arts, but of the human heart, its desires, its fears, its betrayals. Dr. Redfern, I believe, uncovered such a betrayal, and it cost him his life." Lady Ashby's fork clattered to her plate. "Monsieur Poirot, please. This is a family heirloom, not a scandal sheet. I beg you to be discreet. Discretion, madame, is my profession," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but firm. "But the truth, it is not discreet. It demands to be heard. And tonight, I sense it is close Hastings, attuned to Poirot's methods, recognized the calculated provocation. His friend was pushing, testing the guests' reactions, seeking the crack that would reveal the murderer. The room grew still, the air thick with anticipation. It was Beatrice who broke first. Her napkin fell to the table, and she rose abruptly, her voice trembling. "I can't bear this any longer. Monsieur Poirot, you're right, Doctor. Redfern knew something. He knew about me." The room froze. Gerald's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Lady Ashby's hand flew to her throat, and Miss Duval's eyes narrowed. Reverend Hale's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Inspector Grange, seated at the far end, leaned forward, his notebook at the ready. "Beatrice, what the devil are you talking about?" Gerald demanded, his face flushed. Beatrice's eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice held a note of defiance. "Dr. Redfern knew I was unhappy. He treated me for nerves, but it was more than that. He knew about Gerald's debts, his gambling, his affairs. He urged me to confront Gerald, to tell Lady Ashby, but I couldn't. I was afraid Gerald slammed his glass down. Wine sloshing onto the tablecloth. That's a lie. Redfern was a meddler, sticking his nose where it didn't belong. But I never— Enough! Lady Ashby's voice was sharp, cutting through the outburst. "Beatrice, are you saying doctor?" Redfern threatened to expose Gerald. Beatrice shook her head, her hands trembling. Not threaten exactly. He was kind but insistent. He said the truth would help me. But I couldn't face it. I told him to leave it alone, but he— Wouldn't Poirot's eyes gleamed, his gaze fixed on Beatrice. "And this truth, madame, it is painful, yes? Did you see Doctor Redfern after dinner, perhaps in the library, to plead with him?" "No!" Beatrice's voice rose, almost a cry. "I was in my room, as I said. I swear it." Gerald stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is madness. You're accusing my wife now, Poirot. I won't have it." Poirot raised a hand, his authority silencing the room. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Gerald. I accuse no one, yet. But Madame Beatrice, she has given us a truth, a piece of the puzzle. Dr. Redfern, he knew of a fracture in this family, a secret that threatened someone. And that someone, they ensured his silence." Hastings watched, his heart pounding, as the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Beatrice's confession had cracked the facade, but it also muddied the waters. Was her admission genuine, or a calculated move to deflect suspicion? Poirot, undeterred, turned to Miss Duval. "Mademoiselle, you are observant. Did you know of Madame Beatrice's distress? Or of Dr. Redfern's interest in her troubles?" Miss Duval's lips curved slightly, but her eyes were guarded. "I am Lady Ashby's secretary, Monsieur Poirot, not a confidant, a new doctor. Redfern was concerned for Beatrice, but I did not pry. And you, Reverend Hale?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Did Dr. Redfern seek your counsel, perhaps about a moral dilemma?" Hale's fingers tightened on his prayer book. "He spoke to me once, in confidence, about the burdens of truth. He said he had uncovered something troubling, but did not elaborate. I advised him to pray for guidance." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And so we have a web of secrets, debts, affairs, fears. But the recipe book, it remains the key. Let us examine it further." With Lady Ashby's reluctant permission, Poirot opened the book, turning to a page he had marked earlier. He read aloud, "The tonic for R.A. must be prepared with care. Too much, and it is fatal. The secret must be kept, lest it destroy the family." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "This tonic, it suggests a poison, does it not? And Dr. Redfern, a physician, would recognize such a thing. Did he see a connection to someone here? A scandal, perhaps, that echoes today?" Lady Ashby's voice was barely a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, you suggest my family's past is tied to this crime. I cannot believe it. Yet we must," Poirot said. "The ash in the library fireplace, the times on the stationery, the cyanide. They are linked to this book, to a truth someone wishes to bury. Beatrice's tears spilled over, and she sank back into her chair, covering her face. Gerald, his anger spent, stared at her with a mix of guilt and confusion. Miss Duval's calm seemed to falter, her fingers twitching, while Reverend Hale's prayer book trembled in his hands. Lady Ashby looked as though she might faint. Inspector Grange, sensing the moment, stood. "Monsieur Poirot, this is all very dramatic, but where's the evidence? Mrs. Ashby's confession points to motive, but we need more than family squabbles." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, Inspector. The evidence, it is here, in the emotions, the lies, the silences. Madame Beatrice has given us a truth, but not the whole truth. The killer, they are close, and they feel the net tightening." As the dinner ended, the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion. Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "The emotional break, Hastings. It is a turning point. Beatrice's confession, it reveals a motive, but not the murderer. The killer used her distress to cast suspicion on Gerald, but the truth lies elsewhere. The recipe book, the ash, the times, they point to a deeper secret, one doctor. Redfern died to protect or expose Hastings frowned. You think Beatrice is innocent, then? Innocent of murder, perhaps, Poirot said. But she hides something, as do they all. Tomorrow we shall set a trap, and the killer will reveal themselves." The house settled into an uneasy silence, but Hastings felt the storm gathering. Beatrice's outburst had shifted the game, exposing raw nerves and hidden truths. Poirot's little grey cells were closing in, and the murderer, whoever they were, could no longer hide in the shadows. Chapter 9. The Trap. The morning of Monday, August 25th, 1925, broke with a deceptive calm over Thornfield Grange, the Dorset sun casting a pale light through the manor's windows. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused by the distant crow of a rooster, felt the weight of the past 2 days pressing upon him. The murder of Dr. Lionel Redfern had unravelled the household civility, and Beatrice Ashby's emotional outburst at dinner had exposed a tangle of secrets, debts, affairs, and fears that pointed to a motive for murder. Yet Hercule Poirot, ever methodical, remained undaunted, his small figure radiating a quiet determination as he prepared to tighten the noose around the killer. Hastings found Poirot in the library, the scene of the crime, poring over Cassandra Ashby's recipe book. The detective's gloved fingers turned the brittle pages with care, his eyes scanning the faded script. Beside him lay the cryptic paper with the times, 12:15, 2:30, 40, and a small pile of ash collected from the fireplace, preserved in an envelope. "Mon ami," Poirot said without looking up, "today we set a trap. The killer, they grow nervous, and nervousness leads to mistakes. We shall provoke, and we shall observe Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic plans, frowned. A trap? You mean to flush out the murderer by making them think you're onto them?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his moustache twitching. "The killer believes they have outwitted us, but they have left traces. The ash, the times, the book. We shall use these to unsettle them, to force their hand. Poirot's plan, as he explained, was to gather the household that evening and announce that he had uncovered a critical clue in the recipe book, a clue that would reveal the murderer's identity. He would watch their reactions, noting every glance, every tremor, to identify the guilty party. "The psychology, Hastings," he said, "it is the key. The murderer, they will fear exposure and act to protect their secret." Throughout the day, Poirot moved with purpose, questioning the servants and guests with renewed intensity. He spoke again with Ellen, the maid, pressing her about the tea tray she had prepared for Dr. Redfern. "Mademoiselle," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you placed the tray outside the library at 7:30 a.m. Did you see anyone near the door, perhaps earlier, at 4 a.m.? Ellen's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, sir. I was asleep at 4. I only went to the library at 7:30, as I told you." Poirot nodded, but Hastings caught the glint in his eye, a sign that he had noted something significant in her response. Next he spoke with Mrs. Gibbs, the housekeeper, about the burned paper in the fireplace. "Madam," he asked, "this ash, it contained the name Ashby. Have you seen any letters or documents missing from Lady Ashby's study?" Mrs. Gibbs frowned, her hands twisting her apron. "Not missing, sir, but Lady Ashby keeps her stationery locked in her desk. Only she and Miss Duval have access. For correspondence." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Miss Duval, you say?" "Interesting. Merci, madame." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot requested a private meeting with Lady Ashby in her study. She sat behind her desk, her silver hair immaculate, but her face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this ordeal is unbearable. Have you found anything to end it?" Poirot held up the recipe book. "This, madame, holds the truth. Dr. Redfern discovered something in its pages, a secret from your family's past, perhaps a scandal involving R.A. I believe it is why he was killed. Tonight, I shall reveal what I have learned, and the murderer will be exposed." Lady Ashby's hands trembled. "A scandal? I cannot imagine what you mean. The book is old, personal, but surely not dangerous." "We shall see," Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. "But I ask you, madame, to trust Hercule Poirot. The truth, it will emerge by evening." The household gathered in the drawing-room, the air thick with anticipation. Inspector Grange and Sergeant Brooks stood by the door, their presence a reminder of the crime's gravity. The guests, Lady Ashby, Gerald, Beatrice, Miss Duval, and Reverend Hale, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a study in apprehension. Poirot stood before them, the recipe book in one hand, the paper with the Times in the other. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice commanding, "the murder of Dr. Redfern was no act of impulse. It was planned, precise, and rooted in a secret hidden in this book." He held up the recipe book, its leather cover gleaming in the lamplight. Cassandra Ashby wrote of a tonic for R.A., a mixture that could be fatal if misused. Dr. Redfern, a physician, recognized its significance, a poison perhaps used long ago. He believed it connected to someone in this room. The guests stirred, their eyes flickering with unease. Gerald snorted, but his hand shook as he lit a cigarette. Beatrice's face paled, her fingers clutching her necklace. Miss Duval's expression remained impassive, but her hands were tightly clasped. Reverend Hale's lips moved silently, as though in prayer. Poirot continued, holding up the paper. "And this, Times written on Lady Ashby's stationery, 12:15-2:30:40. A record, perhaps, of the killer's movements, or a witness's observation. And in the fireplace, ash with the name Ashby. Someone burned evidence, but not carefully enough." Lady Ashby gasped. "Monsieur Poirot, you cannot mean one of us." "I mean precisely that," Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the room. "Tonight, I have uncovered a clue that points to the murderer. It is a detail, small but damning, hidden in the book's pages. By tomorrow, I shall name the killer." The room erupted in murmurs. Gerald stood, his face flushed. "This is a farce, Poirot. You're bluffing, trying to scare someone into confessing." Beatrice's voice was sharp. "Gerald, sit down. You're making it worse." Miss Duval spoke calmly. "Monsieur Poirot, you are clever, but you risk accusing the innocent. Be certain of your facts." Reverend Hale's voice was soft. "Let us trust in justice, not fear." Poirot's smile was serene. "Justice, Reverend, is my purpose. The trap is set, and the killer, they will act. Hercule Poirot does not bluff." As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with dread, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, do you really have a clue, or is this all a ruse?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A bit of both, mon ami. The clue is real. The tonic for R.A. suggests a historical crime, and Dr. Redfern's interest in it made him a threat. The Times, the Ash, they point to someone with access to Lady Ashby's study. But the trap, it is to force the killer's hand. They will try to destroy the book, or silence another, and we shall be watching." That night, Poirot and Hastings took turns keeping vigil near Lady Ashby's study, where the recipe book was locked in the safe. The house was silent, save for the creak of floorboards and the distant tick of the grandfather clock. At 1 a.m., Hastings, stationed in the hall, heard a faint sound, a door opening, then soft footsteps. He signalled Poirot, who emerged from the shadows, his eyes alert. The footsteps paused at the study door, and a figure slipped inside. Poirot and Hastings followed, moving silently. In the dim light, they saw Miss Clara Duval, her hands on the safe, a hairpin poised to pick the lock. She froze as Poirot's voice cut through the silence. "Mademoiselle Duval, you seek the book, yes?" But it is too late. The trap it has sprung. Miss Duval's composure shattered, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I only wanted to protect Lady Ashby. The book, it contains secrets that could ruin her." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Secrets, mademoiselle, or evidence of murder?" Hastings held his breath, the trap's success hanging in the balance. The killer's next move would reveal all, or plunge Thornfield Grange deeper into darkness. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The study of Thornfield Grange was bathed in the faint glow of a single lamp, casting long shadows across the room, as Hercule Poirot confronted Miss Clara Duval. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant tick of the grandfather clock striking 1:15 a.m. On Monday, August 25th, 1925. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the door, felt his pulse quicken as he watched Poirot's trap unfold. Miss Duval, caught attempting to open Lady Ashby's safe, stood rigid, her usual composure shattered, her dark eyes wide with alarm. "Mademoiselle Duval," Poirot said, his voice calm but unyielding. "You seek the recipe book, yes? To protect Lady Ashby, you say. But I, Hercule Poirot, believe you seek to destroy evidence. Evidence of a murder most foul." Miss Duval's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands trembled, the hairpin slipping to the floor with a faint clink. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "you misunderstand. I only wish to spare Lady Ashby pain. The book, it contains secrets that could ruin her family." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching. "Secrets, mademoiselle, or a confession? Let us summon the others, and we shall see what truth emerges." Hastings, at Poirot's nod, fetched Inspector Grange, Sergeant Brooks, and the household, rousing them from their beds. Within minutes, the drawing-room was filled with bleary-eyed guests. Lady Ashby, pale and clutching a shawl. Gerald, dishevelled and irritable. Beatrice, her face etched with fear. And Reverend Hale, his prayer book clutched tightly. Inspector Grange, alerted to the night's events, stood with his notebook, his expression a mix of scepticism and curiosity. Poirot stood before them, the recipe book in one hand, the paper with the times 12:15, 2:30, in the other. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice commanding the room, the murder of Dr. Lionel Redfern was a crime of precision, designed to silence a man who knew too much. Tonight, the killer has betrayed themselves, and Hercule Poirot shall reveal the truth step by step. The guests stirred, their faces a tableau of dread and anticipation. Miss Duval, now seated, kept her gaze on the floor, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot continued, his tone deliberate. Let us begin with the crime. Dr. Redfern was poisoned with cyanide, found in the library at 7:45 a.m. on Saturday. The vial beside him bore no fingerprints, and the glass of water was untouched. The method, it was subtle, requiring knowledge and opportunity. Inspector Grange nodded. We've established that. Death occurred between midnight and 4 a.m., based on the coroner's report. Exactement, Poirot said, and the times on this paper, 12:15, 2:30, 40, they are a record, not of the murder, but of the killer's movements. They were written on Lady Ashby's stationery, found in the library, where ash bearing the name Ashby was discovered in the fireplace. Someone burned evidence, but not thoroughly enough. Lady Ashby gasped. Monsieur Poirot, you cannot mean one of us. I do, madame, Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the room. Let us examine the motive. Dr. Redfern was interested in this recipe book, not for its culinary value, but for its secrets. Cassandra Ashby's notes speak of a tonic for R.A., a mixture that could be fatal if misused. Dr. Redfern, a physician, recognized this as a poison, perhaps one used in the past with consequences for the Ashby family. Gerald snorted, lighting a cigarette. That's ancient history, Poirot. What's it got to do with Redfern's death? Everything, Poirot replied. Dr. Redfern uncovered a scandal. A crime, perhaps, committed by an Ashby ancestor. This secret, it threatens someone in this room. Let us consider the suspects. He turned to Gerald. Monsieur Gerald, your debts and arguments with Dr. Redfern made you an obvious suspect, but your temper, it is too impulsive for cyanide's precision. Gerald's face reddened, but he said nothing. Poirot shifted to Beatrice. Madame Beatrice, you confess to distress over your husband's affairs. Dr. Redfern knew this, urged you to act, but your fear, it is of exposure, not murder. Beatrice's eyes brimmed with tears, but she remained silent. Poirot's gaze moved to Reverend Hale. Reverend, you spoke of Doctor. Redfern's moral dilemma. Your serenity, it hides a fear, but not of guilt. Hale's lips trembled, but he nodded. Poirot then turned to Lady Ashby. Madame, you feared the book's secrets, but your grief for Doctor. Redfern is genuine. You are not the killer. Finally, his eyes settled on Miss Duval. Mademoiselle Duval, you are clever, observant, with access to Lady Ashby's stationery and safe. You knew of the book's contents, and tonight you tried to steal it. Why? Miss Duval's voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I wish to protect Lady Ashby. The book, it mentions a poison, a scandal. I feared it would ruin her. Poirot's smile was cold. No, mademoiselle. You feared it would expose you. Let me reconstruct the crime. Dr. Redfern discovered a note in the recipe book about a tonic for R.A. Reginald Ashby, Lady Ashby's late husband. The tonic? It was a poison, administered by Cassandra Ashby to conceal a family scandal. Dr. Redfern, studying the book, realized this and suspected a connection to you. The room gasped, and Miss Duval's face paled. Poirot continued, relentless. You, mademoiselle, are not merely a secretary. You are a descendant of Cassandra Ashby's maid, who helped conceal the crime. Your family's name, it is tied to this secret, and Doctor. Redfern's inquiries threatened to expose it. You poisoned him, using cyanide from his own medical supplies, which you accessed as Lady Ashby's trusted aide. Miss Duval stood, her voice shaking. This is absurd! I am no murderer. Then why, Poirot said, holding up the paper, did you write these times? At 12:15, you entered the library to speak with Doctor Redfern, who was studying the book. At 2:30, you returned with the cyanide, administering it in a drink he trusted you to prepare. At 4 o'clock, you burned a letter, perhaps one from your ancestor, hidden in the book, linking you to the past crime. Inspector Grange stepped forward. Monsieur Poirot, that's a bold claim. Where's the proof? Poirot pointed to the ash. The ash! It bears the name Ashby, but also a trace of French script. Your handwriting, Mademoiselle Duval. And the hairpin found by the safe tonight. It matches those in your hair. You planned to destroy the book, but you were caught. Miss Duval's composure collapsed, and she sank into her chair, sobbing. I didn't mean to kill him. He was going to tell everyone. My family's shame, my position here. I panicked. Lady Ashby's voice was a whisper. Clara, how could you? Poirot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. The little grey cells, they see what others miss. You, mademoiselle, believed you could silence the past, but the past, it speaks through Hercule Poirot. Inspector Grange handcuffed Miss Duval, who offered no resistance, her tears silent now. The room was stunned, the truth settling like dust after a storm. Hastings, awestruck, whispered, You did it, Poirot. You saw through it all. Poirot inclined his head. The truth, Hastings, it is always there, waiting for the mind to find it. As Miss Duval was led away, the household remained in stunned silence, the recipe book's secrets laid bare. The trap had sprung, and the murderer was caught, but the scars of the truth would linger at Thornfield Grange. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning of Tuesday, August 26th, 1925, dawned with a quiet that felt less oppressive than the days before, as though Thornfield Grange had exhaled a long-held breath. The arrest of Miss Clara Duval for the murder of Doctor. Lionel Redfern had lifted the shadow of suspicion from the household, yet a sombre air lingered, the residue of betrayal and exposed secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the terrace overlooking the manicured gardens, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The case was solved, the killer apprehended, but the cost to the Ashby family was evident in their strained faces and hushed voices. Hercule Poirot joined him, his patent leather shoes gleaming in the sunlight, his moustache waxed to perfection. He carried a cup of tisane, sipping it with the contentment of a man who had restored order to chaos. Mon ami, he said, his voice soft but clear, you are pensive. The puzzle is complete, yet you are not at ease. Why is this? Hastings sighed, leaning against the stone balustrade. "It's just Clara Duval seemed so composed, so loyal. To think she was hiding such a secret and to kill for it, it's unsettling. And poor Lady Ashby, to have her trust betrayed like that." Poirot nodded, his green eyes thoughtful. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. Even the most loyal can be driven to desperation when their past threatens to unravel. Mademoiselle Duval, she believed she protected her family's honor, but in doing so, she committed a crime most grave." They walked slowly along the terrace, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The household was subdued, with Lady Ashby keeping to her rooms, Gerald and Beatrice avoiding each other, and Reverend Hale offering quiet prayers in the chapel. Inspector Grange had departed with Miss Duval, who had confessed fully to the police, detailing how she had slipped cyanide from Dr. Redfern's medical bag into a late-night drink she offered him in the library, believing he would expose her ancestor's role in a historical poisoning. Poirot paused, gazing out at the rolling hills. "The recipe book, Hastings. It was the key, as I suspected. Cassandra Ashby's notes about the tonic for R.A. Reginald Ashby, her husband, hinted at a deliberate poisoning concealed by her maid, Mademoiselle Duval's great-grandmother. Dr. Redfern, with his medical curiosity, saw the connection and confronted Clara. She acted to protect her family's name, but in her panic, she left clues, the ash, the Times, the hairpin." Hastings shook his head, marvelling at Poirot's insight. "You saw it all, Poirot." "The times on that paper, 12:15, 2:30:40. How did you know they were her movements?" Poirot's smile was modest but proud. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They observe what others overlook. The times they were not random." At 12:15, Clara spoke with Dr. Redfern, probing his intentions. At 2:30, she returned with the poisoned drink, using her access to his medical supplies. At 4 o'clock, she burned a letter from her ancestor, hidden in the book, which confirmed the old crime. The stationery, it was Lady Ashby's, but Clara, as her secretary, had access. The hairpin, it was her undoing, a detail she could not foresee. "And the ash in the fireplace?" Hastings asked. "How did you know it was significant?" "The ash, it bore the name Ashby, and a trace of French script," Poirot said. "Clara's handwriting, it matched the times on the paper. She burned the letter to protect her secret, but the fireplace, it was not cleaned since Mrs. Gibbs swept it Friday morning. The ash, it was fresh, a mistake of haste." Hastings nodded, impressed but still troubled. "It's a grim business, Poirot." "Clara's confession, do you think she truly meant to kill him?" Poirot's expression softened. "Intent, Hastings, it is a complex thing. She acted in fear, not malice, but the result is the same. Dr. Redfern, he sought only the truth, but the truth, it can be a dangerous thing. Clara believed her family's shame would destroy her position, her future. She chose a path of darkness, and now she faces justice." They returned to the drawing-room, where Lady Ashby awaited them, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, rising, "I owe you my thanks. You have saved my family from further scandal, though the pain of Clara's betrayal will linger. How did you know it was her?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, it was a matter of psychology and detail. The recipe book, it revealed a motive. The ash and times, they pointed to opportunity. Mademoiselle Duval, she was too clever but not clever enough to escape Hercule Poirot. Lady Ashby managed a faint smile. "You are a remarkable man, monsieur. What will become of the recipe book now?" "I suggest," Poirot said, "that you keep it safe, but private its secrets. They have caused enough harm. Let the past rest." As they prepared to depart Thornfield Grange, Hastings reflected on the case. "You know, Poirot, you always say it's the little things that matter. The grey cells, the details. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's understanding people, what drives them." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "You begin to see, Hastings. The mind, it is a machine of logic, but the heart, it is the fuel. To solve a crime, one must understand both. The order and method, they guide us, but it is the human soul that reveals the truth." They boarded the car to Dorchester, the manor receding behind them, its secrets now laid bare. Hastings felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that Poirot's brilliance had brought justice, but also a pang for the broken trust that lingered in its wake. As the countryside rolled by, Poirot leaned back, his hands folded, a faint smile on his lips. The puzzle was solved, the truth revealed, and Hercule Poirot, as always, had restored order to a world thrown into chaos. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past. The journey back to Dorchester from Thornfield Grange was cloaked in the soft light of late morning, the Dorset hills rolling past in a blur of green and gold. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside Hercule Poirot in the chauffeured car, felt a strange mix of relief and disquiet. The arrest of Miss Clara Duval had resolved the mystery of Dr. Lionel Redfern's murder, yet the echoes of the case lingered, like the faint aftertaste of a bitter tonic. Poirot, his hands folded neatly over his walking stick, gazed out the window, his expression serene but thoughtful, as though the puzzle, though solved, still held lessons to impart. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence, "you've done it again. Unravelled a knot that seemed impossible. But I can't help feeling there's more to this business. Clara's motive, tied to a scandal from a century ago, it's almost too fantastical." Poirot turned, his green eyes twinkling. "Fantastical, mon ami? No. The past, it is never truly buried. It lives in the hearts of those who fear it, as Mademoiselle Duval did. Her crime was born of that fear, a fear of shame, of ruin. But you are right, there are echoes still to be heard." Let us reflect back in Dorchester. They settled into a quiet tea-room, its lace curtains and polished teapots a stark contrast to the grim events at Thornfield Grange. Over a pot of Earl Grey, Poirot opened his notebook, reviewing the case with his customary precision. "The recipe book, Hastings," he said, tapping a page. "It was not merely a motive, but a mirror, reflecting the sins of the Ashby family across generations. Cassandra Ashby's tonic for R.A., Reginald Ashby, her husband, was no innocent remedy. It was a poison, administered to conceal a scandal, perhaps an affair or a financial ruin." Hastings frowned, stirring his tea. "And Clara's ancestor, the viewer, Mead. What was her role?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "She was complicit, I believe, in preparing the tonic and concealing the crime. The letter Clara burned in the library fireplace. It was written by her great-grandmother, hidden in the recipe book, confessing her part. Dr. Redfern, with his medical knowledge, recognized the tonic's formula as a poison and suspected Clara's lineage. She killed to protect her family's name, fearing exposure would end her position with Lady Ashby. But how did you know it was her?" Hastings asked. The Times, the ash. They could have pointed to anyone." Poirot smiled, a touch of pride in his expression. The little grey cells, Hastings, they see the pattern. The Times 1215-23040 were written on Lady Ashby's stationery, accessible only to her and Clara, as her secretary. The handwriting matched Clara's, and the hairpin by the safe was hers. The ash, with its trace of French script, confirmed her involvement. She acted alone, but the past drove her. Hastings nodded, impressed but still troubled. It's tragic, really. Clara seemed so devoted to Lady Ashby. To think she'd go to such lengths. The heart. It is a complex thing, Poirot said, sipping his tisane. Clara's devotion was real, but so was her fear. She saw herself as the guardian of the Ashby legacy, but in guarding it, she became its destroyer. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grange, who joined them with a weary sigh. "Monsieur Poirot, I've just come from the station. Miss Duval's confessed everything. How she got the cyanide from Redfern's bag, how she slipped it into his drink at 2:30 a.m. She's broken, says she only meant to protect her family's honour. But we've got her. Thanks to you, Poirot inclined his head. Justice, Inspector. It is served by truth, not by force. The clues, they were there. The ash, the Times, the book. You would have found them." In time, Grange snorted, but his eyes held respect. "Maybe, but not as fast as you. What's next for you, then? Another case?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "For now, I shall rest and let the little grey cells recover. But the world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is never far from them." As Grange departed, Hastings leaned back, reflecting on the case. "You know, Poirot, this whole affair feels like one of Cassandra Ashby's recipes, a mix of ingredients that seem harmless until combined. The past, the present, the secrets, they all came together in that library." "An apt metaphor, Hastings," Poirot said. "Life, it is like a recipe. The ingredients, they must be measured with care, or the result is disaster. Clara Duval, she misjudged the measure, and the result was murder." They finished their tea, the tea-room's warmth a balm after the chill of Thornfield Grange. As they stepped into the bustling streets of Dorchester, Hastings felt a sense of closure, though the echoes of the case would linger. The recipe book, with its cryptic notes, had revealed more than culinary secrets. It had exposed a chain of betrayal stretching across a century. And Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic and insight into the human heart, had brought it to light. "Back to London, then?" Hastings asked, adjusting his hat. "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his step brisk. "But first, a visit to my tailor. These country cases, they are trying on the wardrobe." Hastings chuckled, the tension easing at last. The echoes of Thornfield Grange would fade, but Poirot's brilliance, like the sun over Dorset, would endure, ready to illuminate the next mystery that crossed his path. Chapter 13. The Unseen Threads. The train to London rattled through the English countryside, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the turbulent events at Thornfield Grange. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated opposite Hercule Poirot in their first-class compartment, watched the fields blur past, their golden hues fading into the twilight of Tuesday, August 26th, 1925. The resolution of Dr. Lionel Redfern's murder had brought justice, yet Hastings felt a lingering unease, as though some threads of the mystery remained untied. Poirot, his hands folded neatly over his walking stick, seemed content, but his green eyes held a flicker of contemplation, suggesting his mind was still at work. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. "You've solved the case, and Clara Duval's confessed. But I can't shake the feeling there's something we've missed. The recipe book, the Ashby family secrets, could there be more to it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or agreement. Hastings could never be sure. "Mon ami, you grow perceptive. The case, it is solved, yes, but the human heart, it is never fully unravelled. There are threads, as you say, unseen but present. Let us consider them. For the little grey cells, they do not rest." He opened his notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes in his precise hand. "The murder of Dr. Redfern was a crime of fear, committed by Mademoiselle Duval to protect her family's name. But the recipe book, it hints at a deeper history. A crime in the time of Cassandra Ashby, perhaps a poisoning of Reginald Ashby. This we have not fully explored." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "You think there's another crime hidden in the book?" But Clara's motive was tied to her ancestor's role, wasn't it? "Oui," Poirot said, "but the book, it is a mirror of motives. Clara acted to conceal her great-grandmother's complicity. But what of the Ashby family itself? Lady Ashby, she was reluctant to share the book. Why? Was it merely sentiment? Or did she fear a scandal that could still harm her?" Hastings frowned, recalling Lady Ashby's pale face and trembling hands. She seemed genuinely shocked by Clara's betrayal. "But you're right. She was cagey about the book from the start. Do you think she knew about the tonic for R.A.? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps not consciously, but the heart, it knows what the mind denies. Let us hypothesize. Cassandra Ashby's note, the tonic for R.A. must be prepared with care. Too much, and it is fatal, suggests a deliberate act. Reginald Ashby, her husband, died young, did he not? The family history, it is vague on this point. Suppose Cassandra poisoned him with her maid's help to conceal a scandal, an affair, a debt, or a betrayal. Dr. Redfern, he saw this and suspected a connection to the present. But how does that affect Lady Ashby now?" Hastings asked. "It's ancient history." "Is it?" Poirot countered. "The Ashby name, it is Lady Ashby's pride. A scandal, even from a century ago, could tarnish her legacy, her charities, her position in St. Aldwyn. Clara, she knew this, and acted to protect her employer, and herself. But there is another question. Who else knew of the book's secrets?" Hastings thought of the other guests. Gerald, Beatrice, Reverend Hale. Gerald's debts made him a suspect, but he seemed clueless about the book. Beatrice was too caught up in her own troubles. Hale, though, he mentioned Redfern asking about family scandals. Could he know more? Poirot nodded. The Reverend, he is a man of God, but also of secrets. His serenity, it is a mask. He knew Doctor. Redfern was troubled, yet he did not speak fully. I wonder, did he suspect the book's truth, or was he protecting someone? The train's whistle interrupted their conversation, signalling a stop at a small station. As passengers shuffled past, Poirot closed his notebook, his expression thoughtful. We must consider, Hastings, the unseen threads, the connections between past and present. The recipe book, it was not just Clara's motive. It touched each person in that house. Gerald's debts, Beatrice's fears, Hale's reticence, Lady Ashby's pride, they are all threads in the tapestry. Hastings rubbed his chin. So you think there's more to uncover? Another crime, perhaps. Not a crime, perhaps, Poirot said, but a truth. The Ashby family, they have buried their past, but it haunts them still. Dr. Redfern's death was the spark that ignited these shadows. Clara, she was the instrument, but the motive, it is rooted in the family itself. They fell silent as the train resumed its journey. The clatter of wheels a steady backdrop to their thoughts. Hastings reflected on the case. The cryptic times, the burned letter, the recipe book's ominous notes. Poirot's revelation of Clara's guilt had been masterful, but the lingering question of the Ashby family's past gnawed at him. "What now, Poirot?" he asked. "Do we go back to Thornfield Grange? Dig deeper?" Poirot shook his head. "No, mon ami, the murder is solved, the killer in custody. To pursue the past further, it would be to wound Lady Ashby needlessly. The truth of Reginald Ashby's death, it is a shadow, not a crime we can prove. We have done our duty, justice for Doctor. Redfern is served, but it feels unfinished," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration. Poirot's smile was wistful. "Life, Hastings, it is often unfinished. The little grey cells, they bring order, but not always closure. We must accept that some threads remain unseen, woven into the fabric of time." As the train neared London, the city's lights twinkling in the distance, Hastings felt a quiet acceptance settle over him. Poirot's brilliance had unravelled the murder. But the deeper secrets of Thornfield Grange, the echoes of Cassandra Ashby's crime, would remain a silent testament to the past's enduring power. For now, the case was closed, but the unseen threads, as Poirot had said, would linger, waiting for another day, another mind to unravel them. Chapter 14. Shadows of Truth. The London evening enveloped the city in a soft haze, as Captain Arthur Hastings and Hercule Poirot settled into the familiar comfort of Poirot's impeccably ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions. It was late on Tuesday, August 26th, 1925, and the events at Thornfield Grange seemed both distant and ever-present, like a melody that lingers after the music stops. Hastings, seated in a plush armchair, sipped a whisky and soda, his mind still turning over the intricacies of the case. Poirot, opposite him, arranged his desk with meticulous care, aligning pens and papers as though restoring the world's balance after the chaos of murder. "Poirot," Hastings said, setting down his glass, "I know you've said the case is closed, but I can't help wondering about the Ashby family. Clara's confession tied up the murder, but that recipe book, it's as if it's still whispering secrets. Do you think we'll ever know the full truth about Cassandra Ashby and Reginald?" Poirot paused, his hands hovering over a silver inkstand. "The truth, mon ami, it is like a shadow. It shifts with the light. We have uncovered the truth of Dr. Redfern's murder, and that is our duty fulfilled. The shadows of the past, they are not for us to chase, unless they cast new crimes." Hastings frowned, unconvinced. "But you said yourself there are unseen threads. What if there's more to the Ashby scandal? Something that could affect Lady Ashby, or even Gerald and Beatrice?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of amusement mingling with his usual gravity. "You are persistent, Hastings. Very well, let us reflect once more. For the little grey cells, they enjoy a challenge." He opened his notebook, its pages a testament to his methodical mind, and reviewed the key elements of the case. "Cassandra Ashby's recipe book," he began. "It is more than a relic. The note about the tonic for R.A., Reginald Ashby, suggests a deliberate act, a poisoning concealed by her maid, Clara Duval's great-grandmother. Dr. Redfern, he saw this and suspected a connection to Clara, perhaps through family records or village gossip. His curiosity cost him his life. Hastings nodded, and Clara admitted she poisoned him to keep her ancestors' crime hidden. But what about the rest of the household? Could Lady Ashby have known more than she let on? Poirot steepled his fingers, his expression thoughtful. Lady Ashby, she is a woman of pride, devoted to her family's legacy. The recipe book's discovery had troubled her, not because she knew its secrets, I think, but because she feared them. The scandal of a poisoned ancestor, it would tarnish the Ashby name, her charities, her standing in St. Aldwyn. She trusted Clara to protect her, not knowing Clara's own stake in the matter. And Gerald? Hastings asked. His debts made him a suspect, but he seemed oblivious to the book's significance. Oui, Poirot agreed. Gerald, he is a man of passion, not calculation. His debts, his arguments with Doctor Redfern, they were distractions, red herrings. The killer used them to cast suspicion on him, but the cyanide, it was too precise for his temperament. Hastings leaned forward. What about Beatrice? Her confession about her marriage troubles. Was that just a diversion, or did she know something about the book? Poirot's moustache twitched. Madame Beatrice, she is a woman of secrets, but not of murder. Her distress was genuine, her fear of Gerald's affairs real. Dr. Redfern, he saw her pain and urged her to act, but she was not involved in his death. Her confession, it was a crack in the facade, but not the key to the crime. And Reverend Hale, Hastings pressed. He was so calm, yet you said his serenity was a mask. Poirot nodded. The Reverend, he is a man of conscience, but also of caution. He knew Doctor. Redfern was troubled by the book, yet he did not press for details. I suspect he feared stirring old wounds, perhaps for Lady Ashby's sake. His silence, it was protective, not guilty. Hastings sipped his drink, processing Poirot's words. So, Clara acted alone, driven by her family's shame. But the recipe book, it's still out there, in Lady Ashby's safe. What if someone else finds it, starts digging? Poirot's smile was wistful. The book, it is a Pandora's box, but its secrets are now known. Lady Ashby, she will guard it closely, I think, or destroy it. The past it has done enough harm. We have brought justice for Doctor Redfern. The rest, it is for the Ashbys to resolve. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. It was a telegram, delivered by Poirot's housekeeper, Mrs. Pearson. Poirot read it quickly, his expression unreadable. From Inspector Grange, he said, handing it to Hastings. Clara Duval has been formally charged. She has added a detail to her confession. She burned the letter in the library to destroy proof of her great-grandmother's role, but she claims Doctor. Redfern had already shared his suspicions with someone else in the household. Hastings's eyes widened. Someone else? Who? Poirot shrugged, a rare gesture of uncertainty. She does not say, and Grange does not speculate. It is a shadow, Hastings, an echo we cannot pursue. Perhaps it was Lady Ashby. Perhaps Reverend Hale. It changes nothing. The crime is solved. Yet as Poirot spoke, Hastings sensed a flicker of doubt in his friend's eyes. A rare admission that even the little grey cells could not illuminate every corner of the truth. The case was closed, but the shadows of Thornfield Grange lingered, their threads woven into a tapestry that might never be fully unravelled. As the fire crackled in the grate, Poirot rose, adjusting his tie with precision. Come, Hastings, let us dine. The world, it continues, and so must we. The next puzzle. It awaits. Hastings smiled, the weight of the case lifting slightly. The shadows of truth might remain, but with Poirot by his side, no mystery was beyond reach. They stepped into the London night, leaving the echoes of Thornfield Grange behind, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. Chapter 15, the final page. The London fog curled around the streets outside Hercule Poirot's flat at Whitehaven Mansions, softening the city's edges as though to blur the sharp memories of Thornfield Grange. It was Wednesday, August 27th, 1925, and Captain Arthur Hastings sat by the fire, a cup of tea in hand, his thoughts still tethered to the Dorset Manor and its secrets. The arrest of Miss Clara Duval had brought justice for Dr. Lionel Redfern's murder, but the telegram from Inspector Grange, revealing that Redfern had shared his suspicions with someone else in the household, had left a lingering unease. Poirot, arranging a vase of roses with fastidious care, seemed unperturbed, but Hastings knew his friend's mind was never truly at rest. "Poirot," Hastings began, setting down his cup, "that telegram from Grange, it's been nagging at me. Clara said Redfern confided in someone else. Could there be another layer to this case? Someone who knew about the recipe book's secrets but stayed silent?" Poirot paused, a rose poised in his hand, his green eyes thoughtful. "Mon ami, you are like a dog with a bone, determined to unearth every morsel. The case, it is closed. Clara Duval, she has confessed. The evidence is clear. Yet you are right to sense the shadows. The human heart, it does not yield all its secrets so easily." He placed the rose in the vase, adjusting it with precision, and sat opposite Hastings. "Let us turn the final page of this mystery for your peace of mind. The recipe book of Cassandra Ashby. It was the catalyst, a mirror reflecting sins of the past. The tonic for R.A., Reginald Ashby, hinted at a poisoning concealed by Clara's ancestor. Dr. Redfern, he saw this and suspected Clara's connection, but he shared his findings. With whom? That is the question. Hastings leaned forward. Lady Ashby, perhaps. She was so protective of the book, Poirot shook his head. No, Madame Ashby feared the book's secrets, but she did not know them fully. Her distress was genuine, her ignorance real. She trusted Clara, not suspecting her secretary's own stake in the matter. Then Reverend Hale, Hastings suggested. He said Redfern spoke of a moral dilemma. Maybe Redfern told him about the book. Poirot's moustache twitched. The Reverend, he is a possibility. His reticence, it was protective, perhaps of Lady Ashby, perhaps of the village's peace. But I think it more likely Doctor. Redfern confided in another, someone whose silence was not out of loyalty, but fear. Hastings frowned. Beatrice, she admitted Redfern knew about her marriage troubles. Perhaps, Poirot said, steepling his fingers. Madame Beatrice, she was fragile, her confession raw. Dr. Redfern, he urged her to confront Gerald's affairs. But suppose he also hinted at the book's secrets? A scandal that could affect her position as an Ashby. She stayed silent, fearing exposure. Hastings rubbed his chin. Or Gerald himself. He's hot-headed, but if Redfern told him about the book, he might have kept quiet to avoid more trouble with Lady Ashby. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Gerald, he is a man of action, not reflection. If he knew, he would have acted, not remained silent. No, I believe the confidant was someone who saw the truth but chose to let Clara act, perhaps hoping the secret would die with Redfern. Hastings sighed, the puzzle still elusive. So we'll never know for sure. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The little grey cells, they speculate, but without evidence we cannot accuse. The telegram, it is a shadow, not a fact. Clara's confession, the ash, the Times, the hairpin, these are the pillars of the case. The rest, it is conjecture. A knock at the door heralded the arrival of a letter, delivered by Mrs. Pearson. Poirot opened it, his expression shifting to one of quiet surprise. "From Lady Ashby," he said, scanning the elegant script. "She writes to thank us, and to inform us that she has decided to donate the recipe book to a private archive, where it will be studied by historians, not exposed to public scandal. She says, the past has caused enough pain. Let it rest." Hastings nodded, a weight lifting. "That's wise. The book's done enough damage. Poirot said, folding the letter. "The past, it is a weight we all carry, but we must not let it crush us. Clara Duval, she could not bear it, and so she killed. Lady Ashby, she chooses to move forward, to protect her family's name." Hastings sipped his tea, reflecting on the case. "You know, Poirot, this whole affair feels as like one of Cassandra Ashby's recipes. A mix of ingredients that seem innocent until combined. The book, the secrets, the fear, they brood. A deadly poison." Poirot's laugh was soft but warm. "A fine metaphor, Hastings. Life, it is indeed a recipe, and we must measure carefully. The little grey cells, they ensure the balance is right." As the fire crackled, casting a warm glow over the room, Hastings felt a sense of closure. The murder at Thornfield Grange had been solved, the killer brought to justice, but the shadows of the past, Cassandra's crime, Redfern's confidant, would remain, like the final page of a book left unwritten. Poirot, ever the master of order, had restored balance, but the human heart, as he often said, was a labyrinth beyond even his reach. "Come, mon ami," Poirot said, rising with a brisk clap of his hands. "The world, it awaits. Let us dine, and let the next adventure find us." Hastings smiled, the fog outside no match for the clarity within. The recipe book's secrets were sealed, the murder solved, and with Hercule Poirot by his side, no shadow was too deep to face. They stepped into the London night, ready for whatever mystery lay beyond the final page.